divine mind. Open my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Hello and welcome back to Growing Edge Live. I'm Allie Benjamin, and it is my great joy and pleasure to be hosting this show today. Growing Edge Live, we have conversations with soul-centered individuals that are channeling their time, their talent, their energy, resources, their love, their creativity into doing good work in the world. And today I have an amazing guest that you're going to meet in just a little while, Bill Soroka. But before then, before we get to have a deep dive into Bill and his life, we're going to go to the Ask Allie segment. And this is where the guests and viewers send in questions and I explore them. And so today I have a question from Harmony. And Harmony says, I want to develop my spiritual awareness and intuition. Can you share some insights, please? Well, yes. So it's so important, I feel, to be able to have sort of this connection with the universe, with spirit, with divine intelligence, to have this ongoing, constant, steady friendship, relationship that comes with a conversation, kind of like Neil Donald Walsh talks about in Conversations with God and all of his other books that he's written about having this close relationship or conversation with the divine. And so how do we do this? How do we develop a way of having this kind of deep conversation and keep it going, to keep it alive, to be in tune? I find that meditation really is the number one thing that sort of gets you into the habit of beginning to listen to your body, listen to your mind, listen to your heart. And when we develop a practice of self-awareness, of understanding ourselves, the quality of our thinking, the quality of our emotions, and then our physical sense of being present, being physically present in our body, but knowing that we're more than the body, that we're more than the sum total of our thinking and our beliefs, that there's an invisible something, a spark, an essence to who and what we are that sort of contains all of that, and that we're part of this greater intelligence. So in meditation, we get to explore things like this. We get to go inside. We get to go within and sort of have an inner exploration of ourselves, this local mind, this local heart, and this local physical body. But what I know is that we're all connected. There's only one thing happening, and it's this thing called life. It's this thing called spirit. And as we begin to see that we're all connected, we're all interrelated, interdependent, and we're all, whatever's going on here affects everything else in the world. Many of you may have heard of the premise of the butterfly flapping its wings in South America and a hurricane or a tornado happening halfway around the world. Now, I don't know if that's exactly true, but you get the premise that everything is interconnected. And so knowing this, we begin to see that, yeah, I'm not just this isolated person that just has thoughts and feelings, that I'm actually able to tune into the non-local mind, the non-local heart and the non-local body. And when I say that non-local, it's really a both and, it's also local. So this greater mind, it may not be your local mind, but it includes your local mind. This greater heart, this greater field of love, it also includes your personal heart, and this greater body of the universe also includes you and me, all of us. And so as we begin to develop this awareness that there's something more going on than meets the eye, there's something more going on than us just having access to this local brain and the knowledge that we've gathered over the years. If we're still, if we become quiet, we can explore, we can become curious and open up our local mind to a greater field of possibility and potentiality. Just like the people, the scientists, the people that have discovered things over the course of our history, someone discovered electricity, someone discovered solar energy, someone discovered everything that we know about. But it wasn't that they were the only ones that were able to discover those things. They somehow tapped into the greater body of what's possible. And they were available and willing and receptive in order to catch that idea and then start to process what that means and develop these ideas, these sciences, these things that we now take for granted, like travel, like all the medicine that's been developed over the decades. All these things that we now as humans experience in our world that help us to live a richer, longer, fuller life, whatever that is. All of these have been caught in mind, in heart, through sort of an intuition by people. And so I give you that because each of us have the ability to become quiet, to become still, and to sort of blur the edges of what we think and what we know, and sort of meld or merge with the greater mind. And when we're in that place of openness, of merging with the divine or merging with the greater intelligence, we seem to catch ideas. We get insights, we get hunches, we get nudges that then lead to maybe a conversation with someone, or maybe turning right rather than turning left, or maybe selecting that book that keeps calling to you on Amazon or at the bookshop. And we begin to follow these breadcrumbs. We begin to follow these intuitive nudges that open us up to have a deeper conversation with the divine. So we have to embrace the possibility that it's a possibility that we can even have a conversation with God, like Neil Donald Walsh, the author, talks about. Or if you don't like the word God, have a deeper conversation with the universe or our higher self. And so we start to realize it's possible. We get to realize that it's possible for each and every one of us. So we understand that we're worthy of receiving this kind of information. And this self-worth comes with the acknowledgement that you're here, incarnated into this human body, to have this very human spiritual experience, and you're worthy of having a conversation with God or expanding your awareness by tapping into the infinite divine mind. You're worthy of this. We all are, otherwise we wouldn't be here. And then we have to become willing to sort of move beyond some of our doubts and fears about, am I really talking to God, or am I really getting an intuitive hit? Can I really trust this? Is this right for me? We have to sort of calm down those doubts and fears and uncertainties and have greater trust in our ability to communicate, our ability to trust our intuition. And so then we become more aware of the world around us because we see signs out there in the world. I know for me, I'm very tuned in to when I see a hawk. For me, when I see a hawk flying, it's a sign that my son is close. For many of you, you may know that my son passed away almost 6 years ago now, but I still feel him close. And that hawk, whenever it shows up, and it does a lot, gives me a little pep. It gives me a sense that I'm not alone in the universe, that my angels and guides and guardians are with me. And so we watch for signs. And I'm not talking about those kinds of signs necessarily, but we listen. When a friend makes a suggestion, we listen, we become curious. When we read a paragraph in a book that maybe takes us down in a new direction, we listen. This is the way the universe communicates with us. The divine intelligence speaks to us in our everyday lives. We have to be centered and still and aware and alert to the subtleness of how the universe is communicating with us. So Harmony, you ask about how do you trust, how do you develop your spiritual awareness and intuition? You pay attention. Meditation is becoming familiar with things. So you contemplate, you become more mindful, you practice mindfulness as you're out and about, walking in nature, or just when you're by yourself, or when you're full of thoughts in your mind, you become aware of them and you become more discerning. Is this an empowering thought or idea? Is this a good thing that I'm pondering? Or maybe do I need to release this and go for something more empowering? We begin to become more aware, more alert, more discerning, more available to that constant stream of insight, information, and guidance. So Harmony, thanks for this question. And if any of you have a question you'd like us to address here at Growing Edge Live, then please send it to me at growingedgelive@gmail.com. So thank you. All right, so now we are moving on to Bill. And Bill is my friend. We met a year ago or so, and I've come to love this beautiful soul and his mother. His mother and I are good friends too. And so Bill, I know him through a course that we're currently taking together, a year-long course in studying the Enneagram to become teachers and coaches of the Enneagram. So that's how I know Bill. But many of you probably know Bill as the notary coach. Now, Bill has written several best-selling books. He also likes to refer to himself as a serial entrepreneur, which I find really intriguing, and we're going to get into that. And so, Bill, welcome to Growing Edge Live.
Well, thank you so much, Allie. I'm so excited to be here, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for months now. So thank you.
Yeah, well, good. So let's get to know you a little bit deeper. Many of the people that come on my show have sort of they come from the spiritual world, either practitioners or ministers. I have a lot of artists and creatives on the show. And so we usually get going with, how did you get to where you are? What's your journey been like? Are you a spiritual seeker? How's it all come together for you up to this point?
Yeah, what a great question. So yes, I would say that the journey has been a spiritual one and continues to be that. And I know you and I have talked a little bit about this before, but I think it's all a spiritual journey. So it's not a traditional one. It's not definitely not a religious one, but definitely a spiritual one. And I loved some of what you said in the Ask Allie section, because that's really what the journey's been, is about curiosity without judgment or a need for recruitment. So one of my big lessons is that I don't need other people to believe the same way I do. I just need to figure this out for myself. And along that way of listening through meditation or promptings, figuring out who I am and how I show up and what I'm supposed to be doing here. I'm a purpose seeker as well as a spiritual seeker. I feel compelled to find my purpose here. And I'm also equally frustrated that the universe or God doesn't speak English. It's like, tell me what I'm supposed to do here. So it just doesn't happen that way. And I think as we peel away, or at least for me, as I peel away the layers, I get closer and closer to source. And it seems to be unfolding. And that's one mantra for life I've really adopted, is that life really is unfolding in my favor and in perfect timing, even if I don't understand it right now.
Beautiful. Unfolding in your favor and perfect timing. That is such a beautiful mantra, affirmation. So you say that you're a purpose seeker. And I'm wondering, when did you first start feeling this urge or this drive to find your purpose? Did it happen as a little one? Were you a curious lad?
Oh yeah, I was definitely curious and highly imaginative. I had an imagination that kept me very busy and kept me from feeling lonely, even when I was alone. I really value those moments. And I think I was compelled to this sense of purpose, but I didn't know what it was supposed to look like. So younger, all the way probably up through high school, I thought purpose was attached to outside labels and material possessions, those types of things. I kept having these visions of being like leader of a country. I'd write these long speeches and practice them in my room, and I was saving the world, right? And gradually, as I went through the rest of my life, I started letting that go. Purpose started coming a different way. In the early 2000s, part of my seeking and my go-to is, if I have a question about the way the world works, I buy a book or 10 books and I read them and try to figure it out. I love different perspectives that help guide me. And I'll take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I'll start to formulate my own outlook on how this is supposed to work and experiment a little. Because I think any theory or idea can be put into practice. Does it work for you? And some of these do not work for me, but some of them did work for me. So as I was doing that, I started formulating what it was that I wanted, the impact I wanted to make. Not waiting for somebody to tell me what impact to make, if that makes any sense. So I thought, well, if I was on my deathbed, what would be the memory that I hope others have for me? And that's where I built this kind of guiding principle for my life, that I'm a beacon of love and light that inspires people up off the couch of life to live the life of their dreams. And that was really, I was afraid it was too vague, but it ended up with 2020 or 2020 vision, looking back, it turned out to be perfect. Just having that mission, having something to hold myself up against, right? This is the behaviors. What would I have to become to make that a possibility? It didn't always work. It's been a long, hard road, but I had something to anchor me. And that's how like my current business started to evolve that way. I never would have expected that in order for me the vehicle for me to be a beacon of love and light, to inspire people up off the couch of life, was to be a mobile notary and loan signing agent and trust delivery agent. Never saw that coming. But having that vision there helped make this unfold perfectly.
Yeah, it's amazing how, we don't realize that the things that we do, may not sound spiritual. Like notary doesn't necessarily sound like a spiritual vocation or path or career, but I would imagine that, my mind keeps going to my husband, he was a notary for a period of time, and he worked with a lot of people in, annuities and living trusts and such. And so, he's a very spiritually based person. And through that, through his journey of what we call regular business, in the insurance industry, he also had that light that he brought into people's lives. It may be sort of disguised as signing and being a notary or whatever that your job might be, if you're not in a overtly spiritual vocation. Like you said, everything is spiritual.
Well,
And go ahead.
sorry, yeah, I cut you off, but yes, I was just going to say absolutely. And I think, as a notary, you can really tie it in there because we get to help people on their best days. Of course, they're buying a house, transferring a car, whatever it might be. But we also help them on their worst days. In the hospital, on their deathbed. I've had a couple of deathbed notarizations, helping families cope with all that. And I think it's a little easier to tie that into a spiritual impact. But I think no matter what role or position you have in life, you can be that beacon of light to somebody. Whether you're bagging groceries, you're encountering people every single day that are having great days and terrible days. And I think you have a chance to make a positive impact on them. It doesn't require that you have a medical degree. It doesn't matter that you don't have to be a minister. You don't have to be a counselor or a philosopher or a psychologist to make a positive impact in people's lives.
So that's really well said. So, this deep calling or purpose to become a light and to share your light with the world, that must come from you witnessing or seeing people early on in your childhood as being that. So I'm wondering, who had the biggest impact on you? Do you have some jumping into the front of mind memories of who was a light in your life when you were a little one?
Yeah, I think I have to preface this a little bit too, because by nature, as I know it, I'm an optimist too. So I tend to see the silver lining in situation, opportunities, and people. So I think I had quite a few of this, but I was also really blessed with a mom who shares that level of optimism. And both my mom and my dad were very spiritually open-minded. So I was exposed to lots of different ways of thinking. So I think that was really helpful and beneficial. So I could see in many different religious components and in lots of different entertainment components, people who made positive impacts or made people feel good, even if it was acting in a movie or a character in a book. Those were the feelings that I aimed to mimic or create for other people. I remember one of my, as far as well-known people who I was just in awe over how she made me feel and my mom feel and other people was Oprah. I was so young. I think I was in second grade, but when at 3:00 in the afternoon, when Oprah came on, I was just enthralled with how she connected the stories that she shared on her shows. So I think that was also a positive impact. And then, as a child, my grandmothers were kind of everything to me. So in my eyes, they made incredibly positive differences in people's lives. They were fiercely protective of their families. They seemed to have all the answers. So I would say that they were inspiration for me as well.
Beautiful. I'm just so drawn in to everything that you're saying. And I know that you've written several books, and I will get into your new book in just a while. It's hard for me to hold back because I'm so excited. I have my copy right here.
Oh, I love it. I have my copy too. For Michael.
Yeah. So did you've got this sole purpose to be a light, to bring that to help humanity somehow. You've got these gorgeous role models, your parents, your grandmothers, Oprah, and you were coming up in that age of when sort of there was a lot of sort of positive self-help stuff flooding the market at that time too, that sort of expands people from, just finding spiritual food, going to church, or going, with a sort of a spiritual community of that type, to it's now these spiritual messages are now in mainstream. So you've kind of grown up in that era of, it doesn't, I don't necessarily have to go to church to get a hit on this, good, positive stuff. I can actually just pick it up on TV or a book. So when did you first discover that you had a desire to write? Did you keep a diary as a kid? Did you journal? Like, how did that all start coming on?
Yeah, great question. I think the purpose and the writing are very closely tied. In fact, now I know that whatever it is, whatever I become when I become it, when I grow up, it will involve writing. And I did as a kid. I still have my unfinished journals. I'm a king of unfinished journals. I think I love the journal more than the actual writing in them sometimes. So I have dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And some of those from being a kid, just documenting my life. And then as I got older, documenting the pain that I was going through, just trying to figure out who I was supposed to be, all the dark feelings that happened through puberty and well into my 20s. So it's always been in the background of my life, but I had those messages too, from even people I loved and respected, that authors don't make money. You can't make a living being a creative. You've got to go to school, get a degree, those types of things. So it never really went anywhere, but I had this calling to write. And it would not be ignored. So I was going to write a book, and my very first book happened to be about the notary business, but it was coming out whether I wanted it to or not. And this is why I love the Victor Hugo quote, that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And that idea's time had come, and it had to come out. And it's been a very successful book. It completely changed my life, and it kicked open the doors to writing more. Writing a book didn't become this pipe dream up in the clouds, right? I did it, it worked, and then I just kept doing it. And I'm going to keep doing it until the day I die.
Beautiful. That's a good place to take a short break. So we will be right back after this.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, thesatyacenter, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
find. Open my heart with the whispers of truth to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
So we're back with Bill Soroka, and you just said before the break that you would be writing for your entire life until you die. And I was sitting with that thinking that just claiming that somehow is comforting. Like it's, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be doing this thing. For many of us that think we have a book in us, and I'm one of those, but I've always thought, you know, I've bought so many hundreds, thousands of books over the course of my lifetime. And I sometimes get this feeling like, oh, it's all been written about, you know, it's all out there, especially in my lane, which is to do with spirituality. I read a lot of those kinds of books. And so whether you're, you know, writing about forestry or flowers or accounting or, you know, whatever it might be, people have this thing called a writer's block. Like they have questions like you've just been hearing me talk about, like, oh yeah, it's already been written, or yeah, I don't really know how to get going. Or so how is that, has that touched you, these writer's blocks, or how do you cope with that from someone that's been super successful in writing books? One would look up from this perspective and go, oh, it's easy for him. So, you know, how do you cope with your creative flow in writing?
Great question. And I think also one of the greatest, and I think I love that you called it a block, because I've never thought of it that way, but it's one of the blocks that pop up. You know, I call it my angry little inner voice. But one of the big ones for me was, who am I to write this book? Who would read this? Especially about notary work, right? And I think we all have that inside of us. And so there's a couple different ways, and I'll go back a little ways to the first one, because my first book took me 3 years to write it. Not because it's a 1,200 page manifesto about notary work, right? It's because all of those things got in the way. I call them the big buts. I really want to write a book, but I don't have time. I really want to write a book, but I've got to go to work. I really want to write a book, but I've got to cook dinner. I've got to do laundry. I had all of these excuses, and I let them get in the way so much that a book that could have been done in 3 months took 3 years. But to help me get through it, because a lot of that is the inner insecurity, like, who's going to read this book? I'm going to go through all this work, and then they're going to laugh at me. They're all going to laugh at you, you know, that kind of thing, you know? So what I did is, knowing that everything that happens up here is going to impact my output, I got a wooden plaque of Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena quote, and I hung that in my shower. And every single morning, I read that out loud with, loud, and with conviction that it's not the critics that matter. And I had to do that every single morning in the shower to help boost that confidence and get over, who am I to write this book? And then after that, after the confidence started to build up, then I made a habit out of it. So my goal was, like, I'd go months without writing anything in the book, and then I'd have to go back and I had to read the whole thing, all my manuscript again, to see where I was. So I said, this is ridiculous. What if I just sat down and wrote one page a day? Well, 1 page a day is not realistic for most people. It certainly wasn't for me. So what I found is I just didn't do it at all. So I said, all right, well, what if I just wrote 1 paragraph? Well, that didn't work sometimes too, because sometimes it just doesn't come. So I said, well, what about 1 sentence? And sometimes that didn't work either. But 1 word? Oh, I can type a word. every single day. And when I sat down, I'd write one word and I'd be like, I can't stop there. Oh, it's like the permission was granted. So I'd write sometimes pages because I just cut the expectations back to one per day.
Wow.
Now, fast forward that through the other books, though. The other books were much easier. The second one was 3 months. The third one took a little bit longer. The fourth one took about a year with a co-author. But then this fifth one, it took about 8 months. This one that I'm very proud of, Dandelions. But it's my most vulnerable piece. It's my first non-business book. And I was dragging my feet on this too, Allie. My co-author and I were great friends, and she was ready to just whip this thing together and publish it back in July last year. And I let perfectionism get in the way. I had all these ideas, but when I dug into it, it was my fear of the vulnerability. I said, who's going to read this book? Who cares what I think about this or that? Who cares about my stories from my grandmother? Who cares about this? And that's the lesson I learned, is that people do care. And the other most important lesson is that it doesn't matter if they care about it or not. A quote I ran into, it's amazing how this stuff happens. And you mentioned it earlier in your call about synchronicity, when you're paying attention. And this book by Srinivas Rao called An Audience of One came into my life, and I just knew I had to read that book. And if you've seen my library, I have hundreds of books that need to be read and I haven't got to yet, but this one jumped to the front of the line. And as I was reading it, one of his quotes was, have the courage to create what you want to exist in the world, regardless of how the world receives it or responds to it.
Mm.
I made that my Facebook cover. I remind myself of that every single day, that this is not about the audience. I love that they're loving it, but this was about me. This was about, I was compelled somewhere along the line to publish this book, and I have to honor that.
Mm. Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about Dandelions, which, I have also here. And I was just so blessed to get a before publication version of it, to have a sneak peek and a sneak read. And it was just so enjoyable. That the whole premise of this book is so delightful. And so I'd love you to talk about how this book got birthed, who the co-author is, and how one actually can participate in this experience with you. So can you give me the start to where we are now, start to finish, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this will go back to synchronicity a little bit too, because in my notary business, back in 2017, I was doing a loan signing for a home purchase, and the real estate agent was a hoot. Her name was Bobby Illing. As soon as I met her, I was like, we're probably going to be friends. And at the time she was in her young 70s. I was in my young 40s, I guess, at that time, maybe even a little bit younger than that. And we just hit it off. She immediately liked me too, invited me to tea at her house, which turned into wine at her house. And she was already a published author, so I was in awe. I had not yet published my book. And we just talked about writing. And then in 2019, I published my very first book. And that was an emotional experience in itself. There's this, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Allie, but there's creative grief. And I didn't know I was going through it at that time, but that was probably a whole other conversation. But what Bobby and I decided to do was, regardless of whether or not there was a book on the horizon, we needed to write. We were both passionate writers. So we started this little writing group for two, like in November of 2019. And then we all know what happened in 2020. So when the pandemic hit, this writing group for two, this was just the two of us, kept like Bobby says it too. She says, this kept me alive. And it was a saving grace for me too, because most people don't know, but the notary business went crazy good during the pandemic. Lower interest rates, people were buying and refinancing homes, so notaries were in high demand. I have a notary business, so it worked out really good, but there was still this huge emotional disconnect between what was happening there versus what was going on in the rest of the world and our personal lives. So we just wrote via Zoom. And what Dandelions became, well, actually, let me preface this too, because at some point Bobby said, Bill, screw it. I'd rather risk my life and be in the same room with you to do this writing. I need that than sit on a Zoom all the time. So we took all the precautions that you can, but still be in the same room. And we kept writing and writing and writing, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. So we have these collection of hundreds of writings from prompts, and we chose our favorites.
So give us an example of what these prompts are.
Yeah, they came from all kinds of places. So sometimes it was quotes from movies. Sometimes Bobby loves Facebook, so she'll send memes and quotes from Facebook. So we just keep them in a little collection. Sometimes they're from prompt books, although we found that those are usually the least fun. Sometimes it's just questions that come to you or prompts, like but we just said, like, let's write about the color green one day, or what was your first, tell a fun story about your first car, those types of things, just to dig in deeper. And you never know where that stuff's going to go. And that's beautiful because there's no right or wrong answers. Sometimes it's about the topic, and sometimes, especially with a brain that works like mine, I have connected 3 million dots and I'm somewhere else, but it was inspired by whatever that prompt was. So it's been a real fascinating journey. And that's what I love about what the readers are saying, is that's doing something similar for them too. The incredible part is, so we created a free prompt journal. So people that want to write along with us in the book can do so. And the feedback is just amazing. It's inspiring people to pick up the pen and rediscover their love for writing. And I think that's the greatest gift for me.
Wow. So if I'm kind of stating the obvious here for me and you, but so this book is a compilation of prompts, and then you respond and Bobby responds, or one of you respond to the prompt. And then, so there's just a series of prompts with beautiful writing, prose writing that just really is quite enchanting, because it does inspire, the reader to actually think, well, how would I answer this question? Or how would I respond to this scenario, this prompt, or this quote, or whatever it might be? And so what did you learn about yourself? This was, what a gift to get this during the pandemic, this to sort of be some comfortable container to support you in your creativity whilst going through this huge falling apart and reset of our very existence here on the planet, or at least that's how it felt.
Yeah.
So what did you learn about yourself through? I know that we should get the book in order to find out, but what did you learn about yourself?
So I learned a lot. And I think, so one of let's talk about the Enneagram. Let's tie the Enneagram into this, because one of I lead with the number 7, which is the enthusiast. It's usually light, it's fun, it's shallow, right? We tend to avoid the dark, painful, ugly emotions, feelings, and those types of things. And I've done a lot of work to help overcome that, because one thing I've learned is that they come up, they're happening anyway. They just show up in different ways sometimes if I don't pay attention to them, right? But what writing does for me, especially during that time, is it gave me access to that. It gave me access to dig in and cry and laugh and figure out what it was that I'm actually feeling. And I think that's part of the kind of bizarre ways the writing would go sometimes. You're asking a question about this, and then this comes up. So writing, especially because I manually write, it like cracks the seal a little bit, and it lets what needs to come out come out. And sharing that, having something to someone to share that with no judgment and no rules, like grammar, spelling, none of that matters. The flow of the sentence, none of that matters. And to listen to somebody else's perspective that's might be completely different. You know, she just turned on the day we launched this book, she turned 79 years old. I'm 46 years old. She's got grandkids. I have fur babies. You know, the difference in the perspectives and how we look in the world generationally and just everything was just fascinating. And it taught me how much writing and reading stuff like this, stuff that I just didn't think anybody would read, can help change the world, can help be part of that beacon of love and light.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I can imagine the deepening in to your emotions, that is a vulnerable journey, and to be able to use your writing, your purpose to dive deeper into the depths of you, and to be able to connect with another soul, someone that's living a completely different experience from you. What a growth opportunity, and what a gift. You know, I'm a painter artist, and I know that my paintings, whether they're a framed piece or a greeting card or a print of some sort, that's going to end up in someone's home or in someone's life. I hope not in their trash can, but but I know that it's going to go somewhere, and it's going to continue to give or continue to inspire. And so I know that your book, your writing, does the same. I'm thinking of dandelions now, and my daughter and I, years ago, we used to have a journal, and we would both write in it. And so I would write, and then I'd give her the journal, and then she would write, and then she'd give the journal back to me, and I would write. And this project, Dandelions, that you did with Bobby, reminds me a bit of that.
Yeah, how beautiful.
Yeah. And so when I shared this book, and I haven't even really opened it, it's still fresh. You know, I've read the manuscript you sent me, but I haven't looked at the book. But I showed my daughter Alex, and she said, this is the perfect thing for you, me, and Poppy, that's what she calls my husband Michael, to do together. Why don't we read it every morning, the prompt or the prose, and then sit around and just talk about it? Like, because I don't know that, you know, they're going to be into the writing or have the time for that. Mm-hmm. But I know I will, and I will definitely do it. But I can imagine this being a tool for us to really have conversations with each other. That, you know, that might be another way of people get to use this book.
Absolutely. I love that. And that's the beautiful thing. There's no rules. You know, in the intro part of the book, we talk about that specifically. You know, so many people, especially the ones, right, in the Enneagram, they get stuck on the rules that they have to do things a certain way. You have to write exactly how Bobby or I wrote, and it's not that at all. In fact, Bobby and I are two of the laziest writers I've ever encountered. We write differently. This is not Hemingway-esque material, right? This is free-flowing thoughts from two different brains. So there is no pressure. And if I tell people, and I have a question for you too, Ali, because I know painters get this a lot too, but writers are people who want to write, but one of the blocks that come up is, what if it's not good enough? You know, or what if it's not like yours, or whatever those things come up. I tell them to pretend that nobody else is going to ever read it. They probably won't. Even when you publish a book, most people in the world are not going to read your book. So even if you just keep that journal tight and you're the only one that reads that, there's a gift and a power in just the writing part. even if nobody else sees it, even without publishing it. How do you recommend um, artists or painters who have always wanted to paint that get intimidated by it? How do you help them overcome that?
Well, I've done lots of what I call art and soul play shops, and these workshops are for people that are interested in painting and spirituality. And so a lot of them come to one of these or inquire and say, well, I don't know how to paint. I've never painted, and I say, just come, just do it. Just be a part of the experience. Step into doing something new. And once these newbies get there at the table and they start, there's definitely is a learning curve to painting, as there is to all creative endeavors. But the thing is, you've got your own masterpiece within you. You've got your own way of bringing the invisible into time and space. And so whether it's doodling, whether it's just experimenting with colors, it doesn't have to be a landscape. I remember when I first got invited to be a part of a big exhibit. And in our area, there's a lot of landscape artists, a lot of really, traditionally taught artists that are just painting just stunning things. And I don't do that. My paintings are my inner landscape. They're my feelings. I'm an Enneagram 4. I go deep. I have access to a big imaginary world. And so my art is that. And so I would hang art that was way more whimsical and playful next to these, masters who had been, traditionally trained and kind of looked down their nose at me. But I just didn't care because I was engaging in the creative process and it felt really good. And my niche audience may be, spiritual women over the age of 50. I don't know, but I don't care because I know that my art is always going to show up in the right hands.
I love that. And you just said the creative process. And I think that's the key to everything that sometimes a beginner may not fully appreciate yet. But even when I sit down and paint, I'm a terrible painter. But whether it's writing or painting or creating a piece of glass art, I'm kind of doing all these different things that utilize the creative process because that's where the magic is. It's not in the final product all the time. That's nice sometimes. Sometimes it's terrible, but it's the process. It's the becoming. It opens channels inside your mind and your spirit that you never would have expected. So if you happen to be a painter, or maybe you're a business person, I consider my business my masterpiece, right? But when you utilize other means of creativity, it opens channels to creative channels, so other things can be possible too. I get great business ideas after a writing session or after a painting session or the glass sessions. There's something magical in the creative process without total reliance or judgment on the final product.
Exactly. It really is the journey rather than the destination. And it is that feeling that you get when you're in the zone. When you're in the zone of being in the creative process and you're just allowing that to carry you. I mean, we all know that when we're in that zone, time kind of takes on a different quality. It can either speed up or slow down, but it's like it takes you into sort of outside of your personality structure into this kind of greater expansive self. And I think that's where the magic is. And so I think if you have a hobby or something you love to do, whether it be write or arrange flowers or paint or crunch numbers or whatever it might be, I think that is a way of really soothing the soul and having us sort of step out of this world that we've all been grown up in that says you got to be this way, you got to fit in this box, you've got to and that's not who we really are. We're not spirit souls that are, you know, designed for a box. But
Right.
yet our society says, go to this school, study this, do this. Successful people do this. Successful people don't do that. You know, all these rules.
Yeah.
And so to find a way of, you know, you said also, you know, what else does the creative process give you? I think it's, for me, it's connecting with other people.
Yeah.
It's connecting with others in a very genuine way, just like your book. You know, through that, you'll be connecting with countless other people.
Absolutely. I love the connection piece. And as you were sharing that, one of the other things for me that it does is it cultivates joy. It's one, somewhat ironically, for leading with a 7, joy is what evades me constantly. So I've gone through my entire life questioning whether I've ever felt joy. And I remember one time I was finishing I think it was my second book, and I was in Seaside, Oregon, overlooking the ocean, and I had just the sentence clicked perfectly, and I got this, I could feel it, this bliss from inside my brain, and it shot waves of pleasure through my body. I was like, I think this is a glimpse of what joy feels like. It was a very beautiful, magical experience.
Well, we've come to the end of our show, and I think it's the perfect note to end on, bliss and joy. And Bill, I'd love to have you come back, and you know, when we finished our Enneagram training, maybe we could have a juicy conversation on, you know, the 7 and the 4 and how they connect. So thank you very much for being here, being my guest today.
I would absolutely love that. Allie, thank you so much for hosting me, bringing me on, and hosting a platform that allows for conversations like this.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here today with us. We will be here next week with Nemo Patel. He's a rapper. He's got a nonprofit called the Empty Hands, and we'll be diving into everything that he's doing in the world. Thanks to Bill, thanks to Michael, and thanks to New Thought Media Network for hosting us today. Peace and blessings. Know that you're loved. Mwah. Bye-bye.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge.